And just like that, we are live to the world on the interweb with interior designer. A celebrity interior designer, Hamish Dodd. How do you feel about that word, Hamish?
Yeah, just interior. I do interior and landscapes predominantly because
Yeah.
I guess background when I was at school, I started flying. My father was he's an accountant, but he had a big passion for glider flying and flying aeroplanes and bits and pieces. So I guess it kind of flowed on to me, and I was planning on always A, joining the Air Force, or B, being a commercial pilot. I always had that love. And one of the things my father said to me one day was, you need a second string to your bow.
Yeah,
because
right.
aviation is up and down industry.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
funny how he said that, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's a long time ago. And he said to me, I've enrolled you at Tech to do horticulture.
Oh.
And I was like, what? Why? And he said, because I've noticed you and you love the garden, you love planting plants and being around it. So off I went to Tech, and I would have to say it's the best thing my father ever did for me. I had a blast. It was a lot of fun. I learned to grow things. Some things you meant to grow. In those days, some things you weren't allowed to grow. Just, a good time. And I made some solid friends through that period. When I finished Tech, I decided I wanted to do my OE kind of thing, the Kiwi extravaganza.
Sure.
Yet I really didn't know what to do. I had no real desire to go back to the UK or London to see that side of the world, but that's where a design school called Inchbald was, which does interior and landscapes. And so what I did was I travelled up there and enrolled in the course, and I basically studied up there for a while, doing landscape design and a little bit of spatial design, which is what sort of then gave me my background. My mother's an interior designer, so when I came back, I kind of dropped into that mode, and I guess I was kind of lucky because I had my mother, who sort of opened those doors and sort of mentored me through the process.
Right.
And I found when I came back, and sadly this is a long time ago, this is 1998, New Zealanders didn't spend a lot of money on their gardens. If someone said they were spending $20,000, that was a lot of money. That was a big garden to do. And there was more work in interiors. And I think that television turned me more into an interior designer than a landscape designer, purely because I went and auditioned one day and they said, I was like, what garden do you want me to do? And they turned around and went, no, we want you to do the interiors. Can you do that? And I went, okay. And by proxy, my name got out there more as an interior designer as the process.
Because you were talking about 1998. Isn't that actually, I'm just having a look at your Wikipedia page. That's My House, My Castle was 99. So that actually was, so when you turned up for My House, My Castle, you blagged it. You weren't an interior designer. You obviously had design. You obviously had the design skills, but it wasn't necessarily interior design. And you just blagged it and went from the garden. And you opened the door and walked inside, and that was your job then. Yeah,
that's exactly right. It was the first thing I ever did actually was an indoor-outdoor special for Ground Force with Tony Morrell and Xanthi White, and I did the inside, and they were outside doing the garden. And Jeanette MacDonald was there, and she's hilarious. I love her. She was just so much fun. And obviously I was a little kid who had turned up on set with my bleached white hair and tragically Prada loafers on. I was a designer. I'm a bit more casual now. You get older and you realize the real life. And I was sitting down talking to her, and she said, come and talk to me about my bathroom renovation. I was like, I really need to work. And she goes, trust me, it'll be worth your while. And then I got a phone call afterwards, and they said, Jeanette thinks you should be the designer on My House, My Castle. And pretty much that's how it went. And along I trucked. That's what I became, was a designer on television, doing predominantly interiors and some gardens.
I'm just thinking, you probably, I don't recognize, I'm looking at your Wikipedia page, that's why I'm looking off this way. What was the name of that show? I don't think you were involved with it, but it was, I think, Just Gardens, where they turned up and they did someone's garden without them knowing. It was like because Jeanette MacDonald was the host of that.
She was, and I can't even think. Was it great? No, it was. Yeah, what was the name of that show?
Because I was going to say, my sister's house got done with that out in Muriwai in West Auckland. So I was just thinking, it's a small world actually. When you mentioned Jeanette MacDonald, I remember her sitting under their house in the shade during the non-filming times, while all of us lugged around hundreds of tons of retaining walls. So yeah,
and smoking Marlboro Light cigarettes. Yeah.
Lynn of Tawa. Oh, that's a really interesting thing. So, it's a silly question to ask if you had to pick, because you don't have to pick. But is there one you kind of were thrown into the interior design? Is there one that you more gravitate to at the moment? One that you enjoy more at the moment than the other?
I thoroughly enjoy the houses, and I enjoy the creating of the spaces inside the home and the transformations that can take place relatively quickly. Gardens can be quite instant in their appeal, depending on the scale of what you build. However, we were always taught you design gardens out for a 15-year period.
Right.
It's what it's going to look like in 15 years' time, as opposed to right now, thinking about your plant choices, etc. What I have found is that the smaller amount of gardens that I work on, which I do in collaboration with some great other designers like Jules Moore and Gavin Olsen, they're fun because I choose to do them. I don't have to do a garden every day. I'm not continually garden. And I have to say, I particularly like smaller gardens and maybe more challenging sites, the little ones. They interest me.
Right.
And that's kind of coming into effect more, because when I was in London, those were gardens, right? They were all small landlocked gardens. I wasn't going to get offered to go and work on some of the big gardens around the place. So it was small design work in small confined spaces. And as the building environment and how we live in New Zealand is changing rapidly to a more environment, I'm coming across them. So you're finding more challenging spaces. So every now and again, I jump in and do a bit of work on them. And I have to say, a lot of it now that I do stems from doing the interiors. So, will you design the garden, Hamish? I'm like, I'll tell you what, I'll do a basic concept, I'll overview it.
Gotcha.
However, I'll pass it on to someone who is a specialist in that field. I think you get a better result. It's a team effort, not a one-man band.
It's interesting as well when you go, I'm finding with age how much more I appreciate kind of beautiful things and making a space in a certain way. I mean, this studio is an example of that. I mean, there was a part of me that, and people who have watched or listened to this in the last few weeks will know I'm now based in my home. I built a studio in my house. I put up a wall between a big lounge space, and one half is now my studio, the other half is now a smaller lounge. And I had a I issue that I didn't want to do a lot of jib stopping because it creates a lot of dust. So I thought I'll go with wallpaper. And it was really a practical issue. But then I was like, man, if I'm going to go, I want to go hard. And I found these guys. I've got a real love, like the house that I live in Dunedin is in an area called Northeast Valley, which is quite, it's not rural, but just over the hill is an eco-sanctuary that has really helped our bird population down here called Orokonui, and it's literally just kind of over the hill. And so we get bird life and stuff down here. And I've always been in love with birds. I've got bird feeders on my property, and I love the tuis coming in, and the bellbirds and the wax-eyes and fantails, and watch them all like all day. I can just sit in the chair and watch them. I can waste an hour just watching the bird feeders, And I thought, 100%. For me, it's like this podcast that we do, whilst it talks to the world, this is not a Dunedin product, meaning for Dunedin. It's proudly and overtly made in Dunedin. And then I think about the world and I go, it's proudly and overtly made in New Zealand. And I wanted something to kind of represent me, my loves and my desires, but also where we're sitting in the world. And I'll show you. You're an interior designer, so I'll show you. This is not a very good picture because I'm going to actually pull up one of my other cameras, and then I'll go and I'll show you something online. So this wallpaper here, you can't see it very well there. What I'll do is from a company called Paper Hands. And this is no, I mean this is, I paid for it. This is not a product placement. This day and age people want to know what's an advert. That's just because I freaking love these. I love these guys, and I'll tell everybody about them. They're called Paper Hands, and I always get confused. They're not hand painted wallpaper, but they're screen printed. So is that a difference? Yep. So they are painted, but they're.
But they are hand done. Yeah, they're hand finished wallpapers. Yeah, they're not machine done.
Yeah. And so this is the stuff that I got on my wall. There's this product here. This is tuis. Can you see that? It's probably a bit small for you. If I zoom in, can I zoom in?
No, I can see it well.
If I zoom in a couple of times.
It's got the tuis and kofi flowers.
Yep, except the one I got was that version there, which is kind of silvers and blacks, and it's compared to your $60 a roll at, Mitre 10, it's expensive. But what I was getting to was I was aware how, as I get a bit older, like I feel like that's a piece of art on my wall. It's wallpaper, but it's an artistic expression of who I am, and it's inside the studio. So I've got some other guys who do gigs here, like former All Black Case Muse does a real estate podcast out of my space, and if I bring up this image, you'll see. See, that's his little set there, and in the background is that beautiful, wallpaper. So it's if people are interested, that's called Real Dunedin, that podcast. You can check it out on Case Muse's Facebook page and see what he's all about. And it's interesting that I'm now thinking more as a bit older. Like I was always, clean lines, easy, that horrible tea color that we painted everything in the 90s and the early 2000s, and now it's gone into different colors. But I've got sound battens, and I think you can see over here that there is actually a sound batten. It's actually material for sound. I've got 2 of them over there, and I'm going to get that same print, but I'm going to get the lighter version of that print, not the black and white one, and use it to cover those as well. And I just love the idea of putting time, effort, energy, money into things. It's hard to say to make things look beautiful because there's lots wrong with this space, but to make things look more beautiful than they could be. And I'm about it, It's like if you can, you do, and you will. And I'm finding as I get older, the things I appreciate more about a space, and making that space not just livable, but livable and enjoyable. And it's great. It's a great fun thing to. I mean, you mentioned before we started my wood wall. This is that's real wood. They're real pieces of pallet. It's not. People sometimes have asked me, is that a wallpaper or something? No, it's actual wood that we hammered up onto the wall. And just making a space nice, making it nicer than it can be without much effort. I think that's the thing. Put an extra 5% effort in, and it feels like you're making it 40% more comfortable, 40% more enjoyable.
And there's something super pleasurable about coming home and realizing you're sitting in a space that you've created yourself. Yeah, I think it's one of the things I really enjoy about the interiors. I mean, I dabbled in commercial a little bit. I did a few. I found them soulless, short of them being a big monument to your ability. Like, look at this amazing giant space I've created and how people interact with it. I get that. However, there's something very much about the one-on-one thing. I enjoy going and meeting with my clients, having a coffee. One of the things I particularly like is understanding what they've already got in the house, their bits and pieces, they've got their treasure. And often what they see little value in, I see a lot more. And as people start talking to me, they start telling me stories, which is great, And one of my clients it was a Venetian bowl, glass bowl, bought it home from Venice, and it was full of blowing glass eggs. To be perfectly honest with you, a little bit tacky. And he had it kind of sitting, out in this sort of space where it was just lost with all this other stuff. It was not right. And he said, "Oh, that's pretty junk. I'll get rid of it." And then he said, "It's a real shame though, because I'm the one who wanted it, not my wife." Right. And I found this. I'm like, "Why did you want a bowl of glass eggs?" And he goes, "I like the way the light jumped off it, in the shop." Yeah. And I was like, "Oh, cool." And he said, "My wife told me I could buy it as long as I carried it home on my knee all the way home on the airplane." And having flown long distance a couple of times, I was horrified. Imagine doing a long haul flight, sitting there with this thing sitting on your knee the whole way home to look after it. And I said to him, the piece has actually got a story to it, but it's just not presented in the correct way. I said, "There's no light." The first thing you described was the light bouncing off it, and it's sitting here in the shadows. So we built a niche into a wall and lit it properly on the staircase. Cool. And it presented up there. And then it became alive and was a piece. And everyone who walked in saw it up there and saw it glinting and the light sparkling off it would ask, and he had a story to tell. Yeah. So, if you've got a piece, I'm not a fan of a show home. I like your family photo. I like your favorite mug sitting out. If you can tell me a story about it. It should be interesting, and it should be a bit of a tale of your life and what you've seen and what you've done. Not junky, but well put together so you feel comfortable. But everything should have a story.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea about the stories as well, because as I was saying, my wallpaper that I've got over there that I'm looking at, the story behind that is my relationship with nature and my relationship with actual native birds. I've always been one of those people that, you know, you have those stupid conversations with your mates in the pub. If you had a time machine, would you go back and kill baby Hitler? I've always said I'd come back here to this very spot, but like 1,000 years ago, because I would have loved to have seen New Zealand with no mammals on land other than whatever was the bat, and just have the bird life here. That would be my dream, which obviously can't happen. But so places like Orokonui up over the hill, which are just bird sanctuaries, well, not just bird, there's lizards and stuff there as well, and like Tiritiri and Matangi and that kind of stuff are places I love. So that's my story. My story for that wallpaper. So
when I was sick, we did reforestation on Tiri.
Oh, cool.
As a 17-year-old lad, and met the guy who looked after the place over there, and he took us up the lighthouse, and we sat up in the top of the lighthouse and just looked out from it. It's a beautiful place, and I can remember getting off the boat, dropping us off, and walking up the zigzag path up to the top where we were staying.
Mm-hmm.
And the birds around, but they're around your head. And I tried to describe that to people, and I think unless you've been in that environment and had them sitting on a branch right next to you, no fear, just having a look at you, a wondrous experience. And they had the takahi, the one that used to follow us around everywhere we went. It was great fun. Beautiful spot.
And that's I remember actually watching Stephen Fry and QI talking about the dumb New Zealand birds, but he was talking about it in a kind of not tongue-in-cheek, but you could tell there was a love to it, meaning that they were one of the reasons some of our birds kind of died out so easily is they had no fear. So when Māori first came, and after that when settlers came, you know, the birds wouldn't actually run away. People would literally just walk along and pick them up sometimes and put them in their pots or put them in their bags, put them in the kite, and that was one of the things, because no predators, no fear, and that DNA, I mean, if you think about, you know, millions of years of these birds evolving, that DNA is still there after 200 years of settlers being here. So why would they have any fear? So I like the idea of a story. I've always thought, I think often about building a place, and the house that I'm living in at the moment, even though I'm in Dunedin, I kind of call my West Auckland bunker, because it's sort of a big, ugly masonry brick house with brown ranch sliders and, you know, that typical sort of vibe, but it's big and it's comfortable and it fits my kids and me, and we've got a couple of boarders and that helps pay the mortgage, and so it's I always think function. It's function over form, you know. But I can imagine after this, like in 10 years from now, when the kids have moved out and things have gone on, selling this place and building a lovely little sort of 2-bedroom place up on the hills overlooking the bays of Dunedin. And I think about that house often, actually. And I think about, what do I want and what would I do? And it's fun. It's fun to think about designing and developing a house. If I was being selfish and I was, not that I'd build a bachelor pad, that sounds a bit kind of 32-year-old, but if I was building a house just for me, you know, what would I have, and the ideas that come with it, and what art would I have in there, and, you know, I'd like a high ceiling in my lounge area, because I'd like a tall piece of art in that area, and what would I have in the garden? Speaking about sculpture and that, I went over to West Coast not too long ago, and I saw this amazing sculpture from a guy of a Haast eagle, and it was almost, I think it might have even been full size, and it was, you know, all rusting up, and it was designed for the garden. It was, I think it was $28,000 or something, but it was amazing. And I look at that kind of stuff, and I just think, what could you do? What could you do for a normal man's budget, not a $28,000 for your garden kind of budget?
Well, if you wanted to do something like the Haast Eagle, what you could do is you could take a standard sheet of Corten steel, right? Now, you'd need someone to cut it for you, but if you marked out what you wanted, you could effectively cut the pattern of the eagle and the shape of it out, and then maybe you could twist it at, like, I don't know, twist it around 20 degrees so the shape of it's in the box but kicked out. And if you positioned that at the right point, when the sun comes up in your hilly spot, the sun would come through behind it and silhouette it. Yeah, I mean, and that is a relatively cost-effective way if you just take one sheet. So, you know, $500-$600. You probably want a thicker one, so you might spend a bit more so it didn't flex too much, because it probably looked nicer not to have it in a frame. You know, you don't want to support it with timber. It would look cool just to have it coming up out of the ground. And you could do something like that, map it out and say to someone, yeah, laser cut that out for me, and we'll just twist it around and tack weld it at the top and the base. You can do a lot with Corten steel, but I like that you've got a subject. because I think that's the biggest key, isn't it? You want to create some art. What's your subject going to be? And yours is a Haast eagle or something like that, which would be phenomenal. Yeah. And it's all about position. Yeah. When I was in London studying, there's a place called Rousham, which is it's an old. It was actually a British general's house from the Civil War era.
Wow.
And he actually sided with. Have a look at Rousham. Beautiful garden, and the gardens were laid down by Capability Brown. But now he was a man who had wealth, clearly, but he did not have extreme wealth. So he didn't own all the land in the area. And one of the things he realized is that there were some hills in the distance, and there was an old church. Now, the church could not afford to fix its roof. So he re-roofed the church, and in exchange for that, he built arches in the distance, a mile away up on the top of a hill on their land.
Yeah.
And when the sun rose, the rays popped out through the arches. But what it did is it made him feel like he owned the entire area. Right. Because when he said, those are my arches. Other things they did is the house was actually quite small, comparatively large, of course, to some people.
Yeah.
But it had big brick walls that fanned out around it. So when you drive up to it, it looks like it's immense. However, it's actually not. It's all a trick of the eye. And in that house, they've actually got the original garden plans that Capability Brown did. They're below glass in these big, display cases.
Yeah.
And I noticed there was a picture of a river running through it with trout leaping out of the river. And I was like, my goodness, this must have been an amazing feat of engineering. I must go and find it in the garden. I got out there, and honestly, it was about 30 centimeters deep and about 200 millimeters wide. And it was just a little concrete stream, like I think it's called a rill. There's no way trout were ever going to live in that, but it shows you the grandeur of the idea compared to execution.
Oh, it's interesting, eh? I wonder. I feel like a bit of a troglodyte when it comes to things like art and that, but as I've grown older, I've kind of come to the realization that it's as simple as what you like. Yeah, I like what I like, and sometimes I look at things like I love street art, and I love people like Banksy and what they've sort of done. It's one end of the spectrum, but then in Dunedin we have a really good culture of street art, and we have a street art walk, and there's lots of stuff around here, and I love the small, interesting pieces of art that ask questions and stuff as well. So, yeah, I'm a late comer, perhaps I'd say, to sort of the idea of, I was going to say beautifying my life. I guess I'm talking about even intellectually beautifying, things asking questions that are also something beautiful and something that the eye can look at, not necessarily getting all your challenges like I would do from a podcast or an article or a debate, but actually, what is this installation saying, that kind of stuff. And it's something that I've come to later, but I'm really enjoying and really love. And it's the kind of thing that now, you also play that game. Well, if I had a lot of money, I would be surrounded by it, surrounded by art.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've sort of started to do. But to my spectrum, I've got my wallpaper out in the lounge area. Local artist called Bruce Mihalski did a piece of art for us for the studio when we had a bigger space, which now is sort of in the green room, and it's just fun. It's fun. I love it, and I love thinking. Yeah, it's a little bit like what we do here. We try and be. It sounds a little bit arrogant, but we try and be sort of 5% better than we were yesterday, and maybe even then. I follow the philosophy of podcasting that the rising tide lifts all boats. I am not in competition with anybody. I want everybody to succeed in this format and medium, but I like to put out stuff that maybe others aren't doing. So we try and a few tricks of the trade, and we do some things to make what we're doing a little bit different. It's like I want to improve my life by 5% each day, or by 5% each week, or whatever it is. And things like making my space more beautiful and surrounding myself with things that I can just stand there and look at for an hour is one of those things I've started doing recently in the last few years, and I love it. It's great fun.
Yeah. It is, and it's important. And I think you're right. I've always been into interiors and bits and pieces, while everyone else was buying I don't know what. I was getting excited over a piece of furniture when I was like 22, 23. One of the first things I did when I was younger, I had the pleasure, when you go looking for your first home, I've always liked unusual things. I could never live in a villa or a bungalow because I'd worked on so many of them for people, building on them and designing them bits and pieces. So I wanted something different. And I found this purple house in Panmure in Auckland, which is not the flashiest of suburbs, but I was always going to shop for the house, not the area.
Right.
Which I know that's not meant to do, right? You're meant to do the reverse, buy the ugliest house in the best street. It didn't faze me. And I turned up for this auction and I looked at the house and went, oh, this is quite a special house. And the real estate agent said to me, I think it was done by an architect.
Right.
And inside, oh, yeah, it was. And so I bought the house. And literally ran it to the coffee shop and put in my offer, and I got the house. And it was an old Vernon Brown house, one of the group architect homes. So it was black creosote weatherboard, slight mono-pitch roof to it, Pilkington glass dotted around it. You're talking about a house built in the mid-40s,
right?
And it had mid to late 40s, and it had a cast polished concrete fireplace. I mean, the guy was forward-thinking. It was a beautiful, and I set about restoring it. Totally overcapitalized on it. Loved it immensely. Thought I was restoring a piece of art, and I got very, very lucky because a couple of architectural enthusiasts happened to buy the house off me, so they were prepared to pay what was needed. But it's about that evolution of creating a space for yourself, and I was into all of that, and a lot of my friends totally appreciated what I had done, but didn't see the value in it. Now, a much larger raft of us. Some of my friends have got into gardening, and if you had asked me if they would ever garden, the answer would be heck no.
Yeah.
One of my friends collects art now, totally left field from what he was ever into when we were in our early 20s. So I think you're right. As we get older, we get an appreciation for other things, and we want to affect the space around us and maybe create an environment rather than, I call it the super yacht theory. When you're 20, one day you might want to own a super yacht. Well, very quickly by the time you're 30, you realize you're probably not going to be owning a super yacht. But you know what I mean? It's this. I think the dreams shift closer to reality. Everything's a long way away, and then it's, what do I want to actually be in? How do I want to live when I get up in the morning? What's important? A warm, dry house, a beautiful house, space for the kids, a backyard. That's my buzz. It's about picking and choosing what you want, and you have to start narrowing the field, because you don't have forever. And I think when you realize you don't have forever, you start to get involved in building cool paneled walls, expressing yourself through wallpaper. These are the things. And I like that you chose wallpaper that relates to you. I like that it's New Zealand made. I like that it's got Kiwiana on it, with our tui and our kowhai. The kowhai is one of my favorite trees. I have one out from my bedroom window, and the tui sit in it. The other day I had a giant wood pigeon. My dear wife said to me, you have to go to the window. There is a giant bird looking at us from outside. So I opened the shutter and looked at point blank range, and there's this giant keruru sitting there. I just went, crikey, please don't go and crap on my car, because that's the joy. I live where I grew up, and it was barren farmland around here.
Wow.
It was lit dairy farm, and I can remember as a child my father saying to me, in this area, wow, there's in his days, there's a wood pigeon, and I was like, wow, this huge bird that just made this swooping sound as it flew through. That was an anomaly to get to see.
Wow.
Now I complain that they crap on my car after eating the poo, and it looks like someone's tipped raspberry ice cream over my car. It's hilarious, and I love the fact that that's what I complain about now. Now I complain about our beautiful native bird that's just crapped all over my car, and I have to go and clean it again. And that gives me pleasure. And I never thought I would be into birds as much either.
Yeah, it's
and
interesting.
I like that you like them. It's a wonderful thing to see them. And I rush my son outside, come and look at this, and he's excited about it. And just the other day, you mentioned bats. Well, I had some scientific folk turn up at the house, and they're like, we'd like to put bat monitors. We need someone who has a stream with tree planting down the back, which I planted years ago. Can we monitor for bats? I'm like, By jingo, you can.
Hell
Get
yes.
down there and chuck that monitor up. Then I started finding out about bats in the local area. I live in Hunua at the southern edge and just on lifestyle blocks out that way. And apparently we have the little native bat, and they like to follow the waterways down and live in like rotten tree branches. I've never seen one until someone on the old Facebook grapevine recently posted, "Did you know we have bats? I just saw a bat the other night." Quite little small fellas, obviously, but exciting. And I never thought I would find that sort of stuff exciting.
Yeah, it's that's interesting as well, what you find exciting. You mentioned my wallpaper again. Look, I just want to say, if people are interested, and as I said, this is not a sponsorship deal. They didn't give me free shit or anything. That's the inverse pattern. That's one where there's lighter with brown and yellows. Same pattern though. Paperhands.co.nz. Paperhands.co.nz, and you can go there. That's the one I'm going to put over my it's the same pattern. But that's what I'm going to put over my sound stuff. So there's going to be a white one and a black and white one. So, yeah. So if people want to check it out, paperhands.co.nz, and it's the most amazing. You know, and after I did it, I just went, I want wallpaper everywhere. That might be when I do fix up this house, it might be wallpaper rather than painting and stopping and that kind of stuff. It's great.
Did you hang it yourself?
No, I got someone to do it because it was expensive. It's not. I'm not going to lie. But I only needed like 3 rolls or 2 rolls because it's only one wall. So that's how I did it. Like if I was doing the whole house, I wouldn't be able to afford to do this, but because I could, it was a little bit like that. You know, I'm going to increase the cost of putting up this wall by 15%, but I'm going to be looking at a piece of art every time I sit down in my studio. So it was worth it for me. But because it was expensive, and because it's a pattern, it has to match perfectly. I paid a guy. I wasn't going to.
I know you're smart.
Yeah.
Currently, right now, I actually have someone wallpapering at my house. I'm a big fan of wallpaper, and it always had wallpaper, had it all stripped off and getting it redone. I had a go at wallpapering once in my life, and it requires patience.
Yeah.
Which clearly I didn't have enough patience, and I kept tearing it and ripping it, and nothing was quite working. So I had to pass off. With DIY and renovations, if you're good at something, do it. If you're not, pay someone to do it.
Yep.
Because the poor job leaves a bad taste in your mouth for a long time. And you're quite right. If you spend a lot of money on a product, if you put it up poorly or install it poorly, well, you've destroyed the value of what that was in the first place.
Correct. And I would look at it, and I'm not a DIY person. I'm the kind of person that I can do real super simple things, but I also know my limitations. And if I had to pay an extra $200 to get someone to do both sides of the wall versus the risk of me cocking it up and then either not being able to use it or looking at it forever going, it just wasn't worth it. And, you know, for me at that moment, in that point in time, $200 was okay. It wasn't a big stretch. It's always a stretch, you know, financially. But I that was the decision I made. So, and I'm happy that I made it.
And you followed suit with quite a good principle that people should follow. When you buy stuff, see, I hate disposable furniture and disposable stuff. I say, if you're going to buy something, buy it as a piece that you intend to keep for a long time.
Yep.
And this does not mean you need to buy at incredibly expensive shops. You can buy good stuff. Friends of mine, they needed a fill-in couch. Well, they called it their fill-in couch because they were going to move to a bigger house with a child coming along.
Right.
And they went to Target and they bought a couch. 6 years on, the fabric on the couch is still standing up well.
Right.
And the foam's all good in it. And I looked at it and went, that was a great cost-effective, but a good piece of furniture. And you know what? They just bought something that just looked nice. So they appreciated it. They didn't go, oh, well, it's just an old couch. We can get whatever old thing in there. They went out, they selected something. It didn't matter that it wasn't expensive, but it became a piece of furniture that has stood the test of time, which means it doesn't end up in a landfill, which is my biggest bugbear.
Well, I mean, that's a philosophy as well. And it's not, you're not always able to do this, but when you can, when anyone can, when I can, when one can, I'd rather buy something that's a bit better quality that I think is going to last a lot longer in all aspects of life. So a good example is my 13-year-old just turned 14 2 days ago, and she is a whiz kid on the ukulele, playing and singing. Is legendary on it. So she's been using my ukulele, which is a concert size, which is like one up from the smallest. And so I said, well, I'll get you a ukulele if you want. She said, oh, I'd love that. So I got her a ukulele, and I didn't spend, you can buy them for $1,000, $1,200, $15. But I also didn't spend $75. You find that middle ground where something could last you for the next 10 or 15 years. And I bought her a hard case because then there's another way to actually keep it going. So I don't have the income. Or actually, I probably wouldn't buy something really expensive for a child anyway. But there's a middle ground which is affordable, but it's that 5% better, perhaps 5% better quality than a cheap pile of crap that could end up, as you say, in a landfill, or worse, for a person playing it, could end up going out of tune more easily or whatever. So when possible, getting something that's a little bit better quality for the purpose of it lasting longer. If you can afford it, I think it's worth it. And I think a lot of the time, this is a bit of a silly thing I'm going to say because there are no blanket rules, but it feels like you pay 10% more and it lasts twice as long. It feels like quite a good payoff, that sort of thing.
Shoes, hands down.
Yeah.
You get what you pay with shoes, and they irked me. I went to Kmart because I quite like white sneakers. Weird obsession, but that's fine. Very hard to keep white sneakers clean when you go to building sites like me. And I bought just plain white sneakers. They were $15 a pair. I bought 3 pairs from Kmart. And I went, there we go. Before the shoes even looked dirty, the soles had worn through and were letting water through and splitting out. And I went, so all of this is perfect apart from the cheap sole.
Yeah.
Bang, canned them, and went and bought just 1 or 2 decent pairs of sneakers to wear around, and a better investment long term. And it horrified me because there was nothing I could do with those shoes. I couldn't put new soles on them.
Right.
I couldn't do. And you're right. There it is. The cheap save, be a bit budget for fashion, which was a bad call.
I guess in saying that as well, also acknowledging that not everyone can do that all the time, including me. I'm not sitting up here saying this is an easy thing to do because I also have experienced the flip side to that. I never did it myself, but I always had friends who seemed to always buy $1,000 car, and they'd just buy a new $1,000 car every 12 to 18 months, and actually, and basically wreck it. Not wreck it as in crash it, but take it to the wreckers and get $200 for it. And basically, when they'd say, well, your car has depreciated $2,000 in that last 12 months, whereas I've just spent $1,000 on a new car, so I'm better off. I can see the other one in circumstances if it needs to be as well. It can work both ways, but I guess when it's something that you're thinking about lasting long term, like no one thinks about a $1,000 car lasting long term, but something that does, then if you can, it's just I think a good rule of thumb. Like I remember, in fact, this as a design thing, I had a builder put a deck on the back of a house of mine up in West Auckland, and I learned a lesson, and I've used this example many times. And he was saying, should we use hardwood or softwood? And I, well, what's the difference in price? And he went, hardwood's much more expensive. And I went, okay, well, we don't have we've got a budget, so let's go with the softwood. Is it going to really matter for wear and tear? Not a lot, blah. Deck probably cost us $6,000-$7,000 to put on the back of the house. And at that point is when I found out that lots more expensive would have been a total of $500. And I thought, shit, if I had known that it was only 7% different on the overall job, I would have gone the hardwood. But because I listened to the builder, he didn't do anything wrong, but he just went, it's much more expensive because he was thinking about our budget. Without all that information, I wasn't able to make that informed decision. So now, like, I'm looking to get a bathroom built downstairs in my house because, when I have and I'll say this out loud, not that it's booked, so no one in the press should pick up on this, but, if I was to have the PM come through before the election, I don't think it's going to happen, but that's what I'd love to happen. I can't send her upstairs for all my kids' shit to go to the toilet upstairs in the family bathroom. We need to have a business bathroom downstairs, so to speak. So now what I say to the builder that's coming through is when he goes, oh, it's more expensive, I go, figures, how much? I want to know what I want to know what more means, and I use that example of the back deck. It's like, you tell me, like, I'm happy to have a barn door. I don't need a cavity slider. Cavity sliders are $700, $600, $500. A barn door is $60. That's fine. Let's go with a barn door. That's fine. So I that's the lesson I learned in budgets and that kind of stuff with designers. Give me the figure. When you say it's much more expensive, what is the number, please?
Yes, I always try and make sure I don't tell people how much money they've got to spend. It's a personal choice. Right now I'm doing furniture shopping, which is what you do for a lot of people. People pay me to find them and source them stuff that they might not have seen themselves. They give me a brief. Went out and found a dining room table. It's an exceptional dining room table. It fits all the bills. It's probably about $2,500 more than what they wanted to spend. But because it was outside the budget, I didn't not show them. I said to them, perhaps spend a bit more here and we tone down something over here, or maybe you're just happy enough to spend the extra money on it. I call it the opportunity cost. What's the extra money to have exactly what you want? And you should, you did right. You've got to understand that, because one thing, where people fall foul is with tiles. So forget mosaic tiles, but it's bathroom tiles.
Yep.
They look at a set of tiles and they go, oh, these ones are $65 a square meter and I really like them. But really, we should only get these ones because we can get these for $40. It's $25 a square meter. You might only have 6 square meters of tiles.
Totally.
It's you're dead right. The deck is the prime example. It's a tiny amount of money in the grand scheme of things. And I always try and explain to people too that one day the project's finished. So if you're building the house and they say to you, often driveways are the problem, they're the last thing to get done. You might want a nice exposed aggregate. Say you live near the beach, you might want a shell mix thrown through it. It would look, you could get it done in plain white concrete, sure. But what's the actual cost difference to having a little bit more and a little bit nicer? Because in 5 years' time, you will have owned your dream house for 5 years.
Yeah.
That's going to seem cheap. And what you don't want to do is turn around and go, I should have.
Yeah.
I could have, but I didn't. So if you have the ability to understand where you want to spend your money, and it's not my job to tell someone, you can afford that, you can't afford that. That's far too pretty woman shopping scene on Rodeo Drive. It's more, if that's what you want, that's cool. Here are the other options.
It's also that, I don't know if this is true or not. I've always kind of been of the understanding or belief that if you're building your house, if you're putting money into your house, in other words, like I've said, I'm going to be probably here for 10 years. And then the next house, if I get a chance to build, that's probably the house that I think, oh, well, that'll do me for the rest of my life. It feels like you kind of can't overcapitalize, because like you say, if you go through that sort of 7-year cycle of house buying and selling, as they say there is, if you spend an extra 10% in this area, then that's eaten up in capital and stuff after that time period anyway. If you're going to flip a house, might be a different story, but if it's your house and you're living in it, then what you're building is something that you're going to enjoy, not that you're thinking about someone else enjoying. And yes, you overcapitalize, but as long as you're there for a cycle, you're likely going to see that back anyway.
Yeah, of course you are. Yeah. That's exactly right. But planning for that final house that you want to live in, I know where mine is. I already built it. It's down at the southern end of Lake Taupo.
Oh, nice.
I'm trying to learn to say Taupo better now.
Oh, sure. I can help you. You ready for this?
Yeah.
Big toe.
Toe.
Pour a glass of water. Toe, pour. Easy.
Toe, pour. What I've found is that any place that I never visited a lot or didn't say a lot is a Māori pronunciation. So, for example, I never went to whangarei very often. Mm-hmm. So I never got stuck with, when someone said to me, this is how you say it, I could get it quite quickly, right? Yep. Tokoroa, places like that, I could do it. But when I was so used to all my life holidaying at, I'm going to say it incorrectly now, Taupo, to unlearn it was hard. But I've been practicing. There's a lovely lady where I go and do radio and at MediaWorks and at their office there. Yep. And and we have a chat and we practice a name because I like to get it right. She still, I'm sure, beats her head against the desk every time she sees me coming, and she goes, say Taupo, and I butcher it when I'm in a hurry.
But that's it. Big toe. Big toe.
It's good.
Pour a glass of water.
Little pour.
Right? So pour a glass of water. Just think of those two words. Is your big toe, pouring a glass of pour. So pour a glass of water. Toe pour.
Toe pour. And when you get it, it's good.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember doing that actually with I think I was working. No, I wasn't working with. I put a proposal through to one of the Māori language commissions, and said I've got a bunch of these words where we should do billboards all over the country for Māori Language Week, and that one would have been a toe, and then a jug of water pouring, pour,
Right.
toe pour, easy. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
phonetical ways you can obviously work with Māori, because it was not a written language to start with. It's still, not that I'm an expert. I should be very careful to say not that you can see by the ginger beard, there's no Māori expertise in me. That's for sure.
No, nor here. However, what I did understand, a lot of people argue and they say, "Oh, it shouldn't be taught in schools." I disagree. I think it's, I took it. I went to school in South Auckland, in Papakura, and my local school. We got 1 year of it. That was it. That was in those days, Form 1.
Yep.
I have no idea what that translates to.
Yes,
and we learned a lot of bits and pieces, which I found I enjoyed, because it was actually a language you could hear in the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now, that was a long time ago. Now it's more immersive. You see it in the news. You hear people speaking it. But I heard that if you learn one language, it's much easier to learn lots of languages.
Yep.
You get an ear for it. Now, to me, why would you try and learn Russian when you could learn Māori and get that as your base at school, where you've got other people to interact with that language?
Yep.
So if you take it as a selfish act of wanting to learn languages, it's the most important one that you could learn. And then you can pile in on top of that the importance of it being New Zealand's, one of New Zealand's national languages, along with sign and obviously English. And it grows from there. It's an important thing to learn. And I find that often if I sit there and have this debate, because I love a good debate, and people say to me, "Oh, it's crazy." By the time I get to the end of it, going, "Well, it's the only language you can really interact. You can't interact with French walking down the street in New Zealand. You don't hear that.
Yeah.
Maybe Spanish. This is the one you want to learn." And a lot of people seem to actually get it in the end and go, "My son loves it. He thinks it's great." And now, because he's got a taste for languages, he's going to carry on at secondary school. He's going to do Spanish as well.
Oh, cool.
Cool. Whatever he wants to do. It'll help when he watches Handy Manny one day with his own children, like I used to.
Well, I used to work on ZB as a talkback host, and of course, the classic argument there from all the 65-year-old plus rednecks was, it's not a commercial language. It's not a commercial language. And I'm like, well, actually, that's not true. Within New Zealand's borders, where 3/4 to 4/5 of all New Zealanders live, it is a very commercial language. And I used to say, if you were in my industry, if I was fluent in Te Reo and I was a broadcaster, mate, the world's my oyster. And tourism, and in fact, most aspects of life, in fact, a lot of managerial aspects of life right now, if you're fluent in Te Reo and had all the skill sets alongside that for that job, you are at the top of the pile when it comes to, commercial viability and commercial desirability. And you know what? I live in this country, so it's commercial. It's far more commercial in New Zealand than, for example, maybe Mandarin is pretty good, especially in Auckland. There is a certain commercial aspect to it. But learning Mandarin is no more commercial if you say move to, I don't know, Fiji than Māori is. So as you say, we're in this country. It's part. I had Pio today on just the other day, and I've said this for a long time. As I've just said, Celtic blood, obvious from the beard. But I still feel that the Māori story is my story, because I'm of this. This is my country. This is my land. I was born here. I've lived here. This is my space. This is my place. So in saying that, because the Māori story is a part of New Zealand's story, it's a part of my story. So being able to speak Māori, which I can't, it's always been one of those things, bucket list things, and maybe I'll get the courage to do it one day. Would be hugely beneficial to me. It would be me learning more about, in some aspects, me, even though I'm not Māori, but the Māori story is a part of my story. So there are no downsides, put it that way. There are no downsides to learning the Māori language at school, especially if you're comparing it to, the classic when, I guess, we were growing up, which was French, but now sort of Spanish and Mandarin are in there as well. There's no downsides compared to those languages. So you might as well learn the one of your country.
Absolutely, you should.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when you travel abroad, and we're proud. It's funny, the same people who say that it's not commercially viable, which is just, in my opinion, fishing for a reason, say no.
Yeah.
And the same people who, when they travel overseas and someone says, "Oh, you're a Kiwi," and and then they start talking about the All Blacks, and then they start talking about the haka.
Yeah.
Those people feel pride. I'm like, well, there's the whole other half of it, or the rest of it, right?
Yeah.
Which is the language. And then someone says to you, oh, can you speak Māori? And you go, no, I can kind of count. So imagine being able to like actually say, well, not well, but yes, I can speak some. And here's an example of it, and understanding it. I mean, I like you. I don't see a downside to it. It's only positive, and learning equals growth, which is good for all of us, really.
There's no downside, but there are many upsides to learning Māori in this country. And the other thing is, and you've just brought up, being overseas. It's another thing I used to constantly mention to my lovely listeners, who are all typically white and over 65, is that actually the only identifiable New Zealand culture we have is the Māori culture. When I say identifiable New Zealand, I mean unique to New Zealand. Because, if you think about all those European Pākehā things, which, obviously are part of my life and my history, but you can basically see most of those, in Australia, in South Africa, in parts of Europe, whether it's something less serious like a summer barbie and Christmas Day on the beach and your flip-flops, that's the Southern Hemisphere, basically. But if you want to pull out something that's uniquely New Zealand to be identified around the world, the only thing we've got is the Māori culture. Even people say, number 8 wire 4x2 mentality. Yeah, that's fine. That's a part of our heritage, but that's not unique to New Zealand. That's sort of unique to, I guess, colonized countries on some level. But I don't say that to kind of deride or denounce any other cultural impact of this country, because my makeup is other cultures, but just purely looking at New Zealand on a world scale. Okay, let me take a half step back and say, in my opinion, as far as I can see, the Māori culture is the only thing that is uniquely identifiable as a New Zealand culture around the world.
Correct. Agreed.
So, again, why wouldn't we want to know more about it and learn more about it?
Right in it. Yeah.
Hey, I was going to ask you, you mentioned a bit earlier as well about, you were talking about that you like the family pictures, that sort of thing. How does that, and for people, if you're just kind of joining us in the live stream, we're talking about, I'm not saying like messy design, that's my word, you haven't even got close to that, but it's like, a design, I like that idea though, actually, as I say that out loud for the first time ever, a messy design sort of doesn't have to be pristine and perfect, How does that sit though, especially in the TV world? And I'd love to talk a bit about your show that's on at the moment. Let me just bring this up like that.
Dream Home Dilemma.
Dream Home Dilemma, because it seems to me that so much of that sort of TV design world, I watch it. I love you. I actually really do like the Living Channel. It's about the only thing that I do watch that has adverts in it. Mm-hmm. And it's only like when I'm flicking around or when we all get those blob modes where you just sit down and go, and I quite like the Living Channel. I like watching what people are doing. But that's sort of what I've just coined my own phrase, trademarked, messy design, is not what you see on the television programs. How do you integrate that in what you're doing, seeing you are currently doing a television program called Dream Home Dilemma on Prime TV, Saturday nights at 8 o'clock?
Yeah, I think that what I like, often people ask me about design work on television. I try and explain to people that often if we're doing house renovation, so when we were doing My House, My Castle, we'd be working backwards. And there often wasn't a lot of time for dressings, and things needed to be relatively simplified. Mm-hmm. People out there sit into two camps, right? There's the people who like treasure and stuff around themselves. Hence, as you can see behind me, there's a mountain of stuff just sitting on a sideboard.
Yeah.
And then there's people who like very clean lines and minimal. Often clean lines and minimal equals restful. But then you'll always hear someone say, oh, that looks like a hospital. Or, right. So it's about designing for the space you want. I think television design, I consider it a lot like a lot of television cooking shows. We watch MasterChef where they compete. Mm-hmm. It's not really a cooking show. It's almost a game show with cooking as the medium to win the contest.
Yeah.
Sure, you pick up bits and pieces, but it's not some crazy French guy with a tall hat sitting there giving you the step-by-step instructions. there's a lot you've got to know to be at the level that those contestants are at. Those aren't random amateurs like me turning up with a knife. Those people are already well entrenched in learning how to cook and
Right.
do bits and pieces. And I would say that that's where a lot of television design shows fit into it. There's a little bit of an overview of what you can and can't do, but sometimes they can be a little light, I feel, in actual content of information. Dream Home Dilemma really focuses more on the purchasing of properties. Now, I learned a lot of really interesting stuff. Talking to people out of my own little world, which is Auckland, where I live, and talking to the real estate agents in the different areas. So thing I learned about Wellington, that Wellington predominantly sells via tender, which is an unusual concept for people who live in Auckland, the other parts of the country. Auckland's auctions, and they all have their own pitfalls and their own ups and downs. I learned a lot about that. I learned that Hamilton is the only city in New Zealand where the closer to the CBD you get, the less valuable the land gets.
Right, wow.
It blows me away. That's the opposite to what you normally have. It's sort of in the belt around it where the value is, not near the heart of the CBD. For residential property, I'm talking about here, not commercial stuff. And I think that that's what you impart. I learned a lot from Shane Cortese about options. I learned a lot from Anita Dobson about the tender process. So I think that's what the show's aiming to impart a lot of, rather than a lot of aesthetic design. I think there's a big thing in a shift, which I believe is that people no longer buy houses based purely on what they look like.
Right.
They want to know that it's well insulated, it's got double glazing. How is it heated? Is it economical to heat? Does it have good window dressings at it for keeping the house warm if it's an older home that's single glazed? There's a shift, a fundamental shift. What's important to people? More and more I'm told that it's warm and dry and easy to heat, right?
Yeah.
That's a shift from 10 years ago or 15 years ago where it was, it's got to have a nice kitchen and a nice bathroom. Drafty is all buggery, but it doesn't matter. Kitchen's mint, right? And there's fundamental shift, and I found that with people, and that's what I was trying to impart on some of the people when they were buying the houses, because obviously we're there for hours with people. I yammer a lot, so I talk to them the whole time. Not all of that's ever going to make it to television, but there were a couple of young couples. I was like, you know what, this house is warm and dry, and it's not pretty, right? It really isn't, but it's a blank canvas. You can come and not look at it and go, wow, that's really expensive carpet, but it's not the color I like. The place literally had threadbare carpet, and I was excited about it. I was like, cool, get rid of that and pick your own carpet, pick your own kitchen, and you know what? Do the Kiwi thing. It's your first home. Spend some time working on it. That's what you kind of expect, You work all day, you're tired, and you come home and you paint your kid's bedroom. That's what you do.
Yep.
And it's fun. I find it exciting for people that they get to make a space their own. So in the nature of Dream Home Dilemma, it's to me, it's very more property orientated. I got to put my 2 cents worth in, which was quite enjoyable. And I got to see some really cool pieces of architecture around the different cities that we got to go to. I found it interesting in Cromwell, particularly, that for the same price as an older home, you could buy a brand new home that was warm and dry and had all double glazing.
Wow.
That got me. I was looking at it and weighing up the costs, and there were a couple of old bungalows. The difference is the old bungalows and villas had double sites, so you had the future potential to develop.
Right.
You could do something there. However, if you were just looking for a house for yourself and didn't have the resources for some long-term development, there were plenty of options on the table, which surprised me. I would always live in Cromwell, incidentally. I know people bag it, but it's a 40-minute drive from Queenstown where you can buy 3 houses in Cromwell for the same price as a crappy old thing in Queenstown. And you're also only about 40 minutes to Wanaka. So you're in that junction. And I love the lake. I like the history of the place. My family comes from Cromwell, so clearly I pipe on about it and pick it up a bit. But I learned a lot going out, and I think that other people can see that there are different ways of doing things across New Zealand, and that we're not actually the same. However, when it comes to other interior design and integrating things in, if I'm renovating a room for someone or working on a project for someone on TV and I find bits and pieces, I like to do the packing up of the house, because when I walk in, I can go that, and that. And often I end up putting them back in different spaces to where people had them before.
Right.
Because people get stuck in a mindset of, oh, that painting always goes in the lounge there. Doesn't have to. Pull it down, shift it, have a bit of fun, mix it up. But family photos are super important. And they don't all need to be recent. I've spent a bit of time collecting great pictures of my parents and my mother-in-law and father-in-law, of them in their youth. This great picture of my mother-in-law in the kibbutz in the 70s, where she'd gone off on her OE as a 24-year-old woman. She traveled the entire world by herself. Pretty impressive. There's a great picture of my mother coming down the steps of an aeroplane, which when she was young, and she's all glammed up, and she's like, well, that's how you traveled on an aeroplane. You put on your best clothes and your hat and got on the aeroplane. And it intrigued me, this different way of life that I'd always thought was so far ago, yet I realized as I've got older, that was not that far ago. It was just that I was not born then.
Yeah.
So finding interesting things, get them to write on the back of it when it was taken, their thoughts that they were feeling. First flight on an aeroplane, super cool. A little bit, so one day when someone pulls it down and looks at it, they've got the history on the back.
That's cool, man. Hey, listen, we won't just, I'm sure Stripe Media will be fine with us doing this. We're not going to get flagged or anything, but why don't we just actually, it's only a 30-second promo. Why don't we just play it to tell people what your actual show's about? If you're listening, you'll hear it. If you're watching, this is your guy's current show that's on Prime on Saturday nights.
Getting on the property ladder isn't easy. You can do it. And once you're on the ladder, well, it's a long way to the top.
But we're here to give you a helping hand.
In an exciting new real estate series coming to Prime.
So, if you are house hunting this summer, go to oneroof.co.nz/dream home to register. And, well, we could be helping you into your dream home in 2019.
So there you go, helping people into their dream home. Obviously, that registration is not valid at the moment because you've got all your houses, but helping people get into their dream home sounds like fun. I've always thought, and you've kind of mentioned it today about you looking for, a table for someone, that one of the things when I watch the American shows, and I know that a lot of it is, kind of smoke and mirrors, but when people walk into a newly renovated house and it appears that they actually haven't really been in the house, so the shows in America sort of set it up that we'll do your house and we'll furnish it. I always wonder if that's a bit weird, because these designers and architects and builders have fixed up your house great. There's a show I think called Old Town, which is a couple who do it. Great, I really like it. I like what they do with the houses, but the people who own the houses come back in and it's like all new furniture. And even though they've told them what they're going to do, it seems that the couples haven't really seen the house. It's almost like they're walking into a house that someone else has made for them. I wonder, first of all, I always question reality TV. So first of all, I wonder, is that true or is it just an act? But then I also think, and it used to be that program Extreme Home Makeover was the I guess the bastion of this kind of stuff. That just completely using other people's ideas and stuff for what you need. I've always felt a bit weird. How much of that is reality in the reality TV game, and how much of that, like, do you find yourself a designer saying, no, you should go this way? Honestly, this would work better. Do you ever need to convince people of what would be a better choice for them, or do you as a designer just step back and figure out what they need and just provide it for them?
I feel like my job is not to tell people what to do. It's to help them refine what it is they want. So if someone says to me they want a yellow front door, for example, there are thousands of yellows, literally, out there to choose from.
Right.
And I guide them and say, well, okay, these 3 yellows here will all work as a front door. Which one do you prefer? And they might, but they won't be bright yellows. They might be slightly more mustardy yellows because perhaps that's what's in fashion at the moment. Same with reds. There are very garish reds you wouldn't use, yet there are some really nice blood reds that look good as a front door. I'm not a huge fan of completely black front doors anymore. I prefer them to be slightly grayed off, a little bit.
Right.
So if someone comes to me and says to me, this is what I'm after, my job is to help refine that. If they don't know, then they're lying, because everyone knows what they like. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know, if I ask you what your favorite color is, you've got one, right? Everyone does, and you can't be black or white because those are shades.
What's your favorite color?
Mine, green.
Green. I always say
Green.
I always say purple, but then I kind of when I think about that, then I stop and analyze it. I go, sometimes I see a blue and I really like it, or sometimes I see but I tend to gravitate towards purple.
But you see your blue and your purple are related, right? So as you start with purple and you branch out, so you're looking at a family. That doesn't mean that you would have to have the tackiest purple you could find, because inside every color there's an awful one. and there's one that currently sits with the current fashion that's occurring. So it's just about bringing things in. I used to call it my truck driver there. I had a mate. He really didn't care about anything, right? He was, design-wise, he was into machines and motors and cool stuff, you know, a cool car or whatever, you know. And I sat down with him, was having a chat, and I was like, do you like this? And he goes, yeah, that's a really nice house. So just because he's not interested in it doesn't mean he can't recognize that that's a really nice piece of furniture or something. So if he said to me, Hamish, I really like grey, I'd like, you know, some carpet that doesn't show a lot of stuff because I want to wear my boots in or whatever, there's no reason that he can't live in a really well put together house. Everyone deserves good design. My lecturer told me that in the UK. Just remember, and everything should be designed well. From a toothbrush to the thing that goes in your toilet to keep it fresh, there's no reason it doesn't have to look good, because we like things that look good. And as you've mentioned, it makes you feel good about your environment. So yeah, I think everyone has an understanding of what they like. My job is purely to help them refine it and say, well, you know, you don't really want to have a heavily patterned couch with heavily patterned curtains, because that comes a little bit too much. So which one would you prefer it on? Oh, I prefer that on the curtains. Great. So we'll go a bit more simple on the couch and maybe bring a bit of that curtain pattern into the cushions that sit on it for you. That's my refinement of their idea. So, yeah, I think that's what it is, really.
And what about when you watch, and I'm sure you do watch those programs like I've just suggested, where someone will walk into the house for the first time and it's completely done for them? How does that make you feel? Or are you more of that's actually bullshit because it's reality TV and no reality TV is real?
Yeah, I sit more along those lines.
All right.
I mean, so for example, let's take the American stuff at its core, the big grand scale, all budget stuff. I can remember watching it when they actually renovated the houses in the beginning. So they actually sent crews in, pulled the house apart, and renovated.
Yep.
And then probably in about season 3, they switched, and all of a sudden they just knocked the houses down and built from new. Okay. Everyone's going, whoa, they've got more extreme. I'm like, whoa, no, they've just realized that the cost of having the crew there for so long while you're renovating, the end result is rubbish. It's cheaper to knock it down and build new.
Yeah.
And then they come through with new carpet and everything. They're pretty generic houses, and they're fitted out with furniture all the way through them from woe to go. Now, in America, you can do that because the population base dictates that there are so many companies and big building companies that will literally build a house for free, and then all the materials that go into it are all sponsored products, no doubt, from different suppliers. To an element that happens in New Zealand as well. There's a raft of it because you only have X amount of money to make a TV show. The money doesn't magically appear to make the physical show itself. Mm-hmm. So in some cases, there are always going to be compromises, whether or not it's someone providing a new roof. They might put the roof on the house for you, and then they might obviously pay some money to make the TV show as well. Now, that's just the nature of economics with making television. There's things like film commission money, and there's New Zealand On Air money, notoriously hard to get, really, in the grand scheme of things for everyone. It's a smaller pot, not a lot to go around.
Sure.
So you do have a commercial overlay that happens to the shows to a degree. However, most of these companies now, when I used to do it in the 90s and the 2000s, late 90s and 2000s, very much it was, and hi, I've got my bucket from Rick's Buckets.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rick. That's what they wanted. They don't actually want that anymore. They just literally want it to be, if you want a good quality bucket, these are the things you should look out for. And maybe it's just, I don't know, in some way it's tied into the story, not overly done and cooked. But how it comes down to makeovers is in New Zealand, we're really yet to have the whole thing where you completely give everyone new furniture. Right. There was never the budget for it. Some cases, yeah, sure, you might get a new lounge suite. But typically, I'd always, because we're a bit more boutique in New Zealand, I'd always got to speak to the people. I knew roughly what they wanted to do.
Right.
I think the only time that it got mucked up was when we made a TV show called Homesick a few years ago. And there was a lovely house, massive property to try and refit and rework and look after. There was no money for a lot of the interior. We were about fixing the ills of the house.
Yeah.
And the lady had spent weeks stripping back all the Remu windowsills in the house that had been painted. And, well, probably I wasn't paying attention, and the painter went through and painted them all white. Yeah, that was very emotional. And so that was when there was a complete and utter disconnect between the people whose house it was, and what the end result was. I personally felt. Oh, and I also painted a ladies' lounge quince jelly, which was a horrendous orange colour. And they panned me for it in the Herald, which was fine.
What happened? I'm interested. What happened with the ladies' windowsills? Did you guys go back and re-strip them or anything?
No. No, we didn't. And I guess obviously I'm just the designer, right? I was not a producer on the show. Right. I had no actual clout with anything like that. But it was decided not to go back because they had probably $140,000 worth of stuff dumped on the house. And the producers kind of felt, well, if they want to sand that back, we've re-roofed the house, we've reclad this area, new water tanks, new all sorts of stuff that gone on the property. And they were kind of like, well, if they want to re-sand it back, it was an accident, sorry.
That's a shame.
I think the worst thing I ever saw was the fact that on that job, all the furniture was packed up into a shipping container out the front, because the house had to be empty. And when we put everything back, the people who had packed it up, which was not the family, we didn't know where anything went. So when the people came into the house, the kids were like, oh, my side tables are in Johnny's room. That's my mirror. I was just cringing, going, oh my goodness, these poor people now have to rearrange an entire house. But I guess it's about what you see as value. I mean, some people might say, hey, if I just have to rearrange the house, but I've got a brand new roof put on it, that's a good trade for a weekend's work fixing the house up, putting the rooms in the right way. So it's a personal thing. With my house, with Coxie, he was particularly fussy and fastidious, which was great, and it flowed on to me. We did smaller projects well rather than bigger projects poorly. And I think that is the key. There was the old changing rooms back in the day where they literally staple gunned fabric to make curtains. I mean, I'll be honest, after watching changing rooms on the foreign ones, why you would let your neighbours come in and renovate a room in your house across a weekend is beyond me. Like, why would you do it? Yeah. You know what's going to happen. And we were determined not to ever be like that. Everything had to be done right. So there was, the old thing we used to get in trouble for was as builders would say, you can't do that in the weekend. And well, there's lots of things you can do, but remember it was just Coxie building. There were also three other builders working at the same time, and they were incredibly well planned. That's the other thing that goes into them, weeks of planning down to the nail, how much stuff was going into that job. And we would start at 7 a.m. in the morning and finish at about 2 in the morning, go home, sleep, back on set at 7. So we worked long hours with a lot of people to achieve it. Television land is different to real life because at the end of the day, you're making a TV show, you're not designing a house.
Yeah, it's like it feels like a little bit that the show is about the house design, but the house design is almost the byproduct because the primary objective is to make a TV show. I heard someone once talk about Top Gear, saying that it's actually not a car show, even though it's the biggest car show in the world, but it's actually not a car show because the entertainment and the thing that they're making a television show is all elements that aren't necessarily around the car stuff. The cars are the byproduct, and the making the program is the thing, which works obviously. And but look, I was going to say we've got. we're going to have to. We could keep talking forever from the sounds of things, but very quickly, you've just brought up the idea of television and how to make television, and I've noticed that I other than, as I said, HGTV occasionally, I very rarely watch unless it's like sport, live sport. I very rarely watch, should we say, broadcast TV, network television. So I went to have a bit of a look around for your show, right? Dream Home Dilemma now showing. It seems that Prime TV doesn't have a particularly, I don't know if it's particularly good. I don't want to use statements that are incorrect, but a particularly good on-demand situation. And I was wondering, I was going to ask you about that, because when I do watch stuff that's been broadcast, I watch it on demand or I watch it off the internet, typically. What's the situation with Dream Home Dilemma? Like, so basically I haven't had a chance to see it because I wanted to check it out. Yep. I wanted to see it. I like renovation shows. I was talking to you, but I go to the Prime TV website and there doesn't seem to be an on-demand section for Dream Home Dilemma, but there are with some other parts of Prime TV, like Honey Wars and The Chills and, Go Further South and How to Eat with Simon Gold. You can watch those ones, but you can't watch Dream Home Dilemma. What's the story there?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's a case of after the series is finished, then yes, it'll go up there. I'm not sure. I do know that you can watch it on Sky Go, but to watch it on Sky Go, you've got to have a Sky account. Okay. That's the catch with that, of course. However, a friend of mine has been recording it, and they have a Freeview box. So they just record it onto the Freeview box, so you can do it that way.
Yeah.
However, if you're looking for stuff on demand, it's a bit thin on the ground on that front. I've noticed that myself. I, like you, very rarely would ever sit down and watch something live, apart from Lego Brickmasters Australia. Religion. It's for me, it's about record, watch later, or I'm on a streaming platform.
Yeah.
And I think I'm on nearly all of them. I watch something or other on something. It's what we do now, and I think that is the future of TV. Really, is going to go into these streaming platforms.
Yeah. Have you watched Hamilton yet? Me and my kids were starting to look at Hamilton last night on Disney Plus. That they've just uploaded Hamilton with Lin-Manuel Miranda. It's all there, and we had. I started with my kids last night having a bit of a lesson about who Alexander Hamilton was. So we watched a couple of 10-minute documentaries on YouTube as to who he was, so they had a bit of background. And I think tonight we're going to be watching Hamilton, me and my three, on Disney Plus because it's just been released.
Disney Plus is fantastic. I enjoy doing that. My son and I like to watch things on YouTube and jump all over the place. Educational things.
Yeah.
We're both quite anxious people and suffer with anxiety, so it's good to watch things like nature documentaries.
Nice.
It's really funny. Nature relaxes you. It's quite unusual, isn't it, that watching a nature documentary has almost the same effect as being out in nature. So we quite enjoy that sort of thing. He particularly likes the ocean ones. But lately we've been watching stuff about Brunel, the engineer, and the Industrial Revolution in the UK.
Yeah.
And it's been quite fun. So yeah, you're right. How we watch things now is all over the place. And and
I don't. Yeah, I think that as I said, I very rarely watch live television. If it's a rugby game, if it's sport, obviously that's best watched live. But yeah, there's not, and like through lockdown, as we all did, that 1 o'clock, how many COVID cases, and then the 6 o'clock news, we were all tuned into those. Speaking to Jack Tame, he was like, the numbers are astronomically high. Apparently the 4 o'clock, that 4 o'clock lockdown news conference where we were explaining when we're coming out of lockdown was like the biggest thing on television this year. Like that there is the biggest thing that's been watched, and it was the 4 o'clock broadcast. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's interesting speaking to you, being involved in television as well, about and being someone who's kind of now working outside the mainstream media myself. It's interesting to think where it's going to go and what the future of this medium, this entertainment medium called television, is going to be, because the advertising model doesn't seem to be working, and the paid platforms seem to be taking off. I worked it out once, and it was some ridiculous amount, like Netflix took in $15 billion a year or something. Like I read somewhere where how many subscribers they had. I can't remember the numbers, but you can Google this yourself, and it was like something like, 300 million or whatever it is, and then you multiply that by $15 a month, and you multiply that by 12 months a year, and it's just an astronomical, which is why they're able to spend literally billions of dollars on creating their own content. It's unbelievable.
Yep. It's crazy. I mean, I think online content's the way to go. So once upon a time, I never would have had a meeting that I was part of, sitting around talking about TV shows, and someone says, maybe we should be making this entire show just for online content.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, really? I mean, a TV show that I made with Alex Bringen, who owns Strike Studios and Strike Media, and a gentleman called Marcus Clayton. We made about myself building my batch, the 100-day batch.
Right, yeah.
It was a bit of fun, and it was almost like three friends sitting down to see if we could make a TV show. Marcus obviously had the ability to shoot, direct, and edit. I presented it because that's what I could do, and Alex took care of the financials, the running of it. And we made it, and then we all jumped in the air when it got sold as a package off to Netflix. And we were like, woohoo! I think we were one of the first New Zealand TV shows to be on Netflix. Cool. It was a joke. And all these American people started emailing me and messaging me, asking me questions about the build and sending me photos. And I was like, that's the platform, that's the future right there. So, yeah, online's the go.
I do hope that, and I mean, I think about, the big sort of technical fights of the years gone by, whether it's VHS versus Betamax, or I do hope that one of them, or whether it's Facebook versus everybody else, I do hope that Netflix doesn't come out as kind of the monolith and have complete control. Like, I hope that the Disney Plus and the Amazon Primes and those are still around in 5 years' time, because if one of the way it will go wrong, or the way it will go bad, or the way that we, the consumer, will get screwed, is if they get a complete monopoly, because then they can do what they want. So I hope that the medium keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, this world that we're in right now, podcasting and stuff, and people are enjoying the content online from independent manufacturers or, production houses and stuff as well. I just hope it keeps all growing and getting bigger. And as I said, in this digital medium that we're in, the many tides, the rising tide lifts all boats. I think that, we can all add to the worldwide web of content that's out there at the moment for people to enjoy, and people find their niche, and off to the races, the media of the future, so to speak.
I agree. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, it's been fun,
so
man.
Much.
Look, I've enjoyed it a lot, and I don't have Sky, but I do know someone who's got it, and sometimes I borrow their logins to watch the rugby, just between me and you. So maybe I'll borrow their login. And so, look, and I should probably say, obviously, Sky, who owns Prime TV, there's a financial commitment towards what you guys are doing. So it's completely fair that it's on their platform, that it's on Sky Go, and that it's not necessarily on Prime TV. So I don't want to make it come off like, oh, fuck, why isn't it on Prime TV, go on demand? It's like, if you're paying for something, you get the rights to do whatever you want with it. And so more power to your Sky TV. Prime, you're allowed to put it behind a paywall, you're paying for it. That's the way of the future. And now that I know how to get it and where to find it, I'm going to go looking for it. And like, as you say, maybe once the series is over, maybe it'll end up being on Prime TV, as they call catch-up. That's not their on-demand. Prime TV catch-up. And others will be able to see it who haven't seen it as well. But if they do want to see it, it's on Saturday night at 8 o'clock?
8 o'clock, yep.
And how many more episodes are there?
Oh, that's a really good point. I think there's 3 more.
Okay, so people can still check it out. And then maybe, so check out Prime TV's website in a month or so to see if it's gone up there post the season finishing. Other than that, Sky Go is the place to find it. Hamish, one other question, and it's literally a 1-minute question. Not that I obviously ever want to know about people's finances; it's none of my business. But I am interested. You sort of do the media work, and then you have a business, which is the design side. Obviously, a lot, if not all, of your media work is involved with design. But I'm wondering, proportionally speaking, how much of your income kind of comes from private clients working as a designer, not seen on screen, versus how much comes from the work you do with TV and radio and that side of things? Like, what's the split?
I would say currently it's probably a 50-50 split.
Oh, cool.
Maybe 60-40 at the moment towards the media side of things. In the past, the television work made up probably about 20% of my earnings. It varies year to year, and I think that what's changed now is not only am I in front of the camera or doing things like that, I'm now moving behind the camera.
Yeah.
I've had a producing a TV show about a property John Kerwin was building. Sir John Kerwin, sorry. Yeah, got to get that right off the bat. And that means that it's extended my ability in the field to earn revenue from it. However, it purely comes down to time. If you're making TV shows, you can't be out doing interior design clients. Right. So the less TV I make, the more I earn from my revenue, because you got to earn a crust, right, to pay that mortgage.
Yeah. That's pretty cool though. That means that, should the I always think mini baskets, no eggs in one basket, mini baskets, and if one area dries up, you can move into another area. If people are looking to connect with you, what's the best way to do it? Because you've got some public social media pages and stuff.
I do. I've got my Facebook page, Hamish Dodd. I'm Hamish Morley Dodd. When you say Instagram, it's at Hamish Morley Dodd, isn't it? People want to message me on that, go for it. Fire me a message on Facebook. I'm terrible at social media, but I do answer when people send messages.
I like it how
because when the list comes up, it says you don't reply soon enough.
The evidence of your skill set around social media is when you speak out loud. Now, how do you say Instagram again? Oh, it's at. So yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. Not big on it. I'm learning, and I did tell all the younger folk that I work with that I was going to make a real effort this year.
Well, look, you've done a fantastic job on a digital medium, and if people want to connect with you or find out more about you, obviously they can come to our page as well, which is the easiest way to find us is Facebook, and we're facebook.com/DOCNZ. Obviously all our other socials people can find, and they'll be connected through to you as well. So, dude, it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to figuring out how I can be one of your clients on one of these TV shows and get a free reno, because that sounds like fun. I'll try and talk to you about that maybe later on. Yeah, you should do one in Dunedin. A Dunedin premises with our owner who loves birds. And what can we do for him? We should go and check that out.
Keep in touch.
All right, Hamish. All the best, mate.
See ya.